Hey, this is Nick Milavoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarist podcast, where each week we are talking about one of the 100 guitar players that we think you should know. And this week we're talking about a guitar player that I really think you should know about. And his name is Kevin Shields of My Bloody Valentine.
Yes, you should definitely know about him. Where you take it from there, entirely up to you.
A lot of hot takes on this episode.
Woo!
Before we get there, we want to remind you that if you're listening to the 100 Guitarists podcast, wherever you're listening, we're also available everywhere else you might find a podcast. Wherever you'd like to find us, rate us, review us, like us, all that stuff. And while you're at it, get at us. Shoot us an email, 100Guitarists. That's 100guitarists at premierguitar.com. You can text or leave us a voicemail at 319-423-9734. We love to hear from you. We have a hot message today that we'll get to in a little bit. But look out for us to open up the voicemail lines about the next episodes.
And shout out to Matthew Field, who emailed us the Nels Klein amp du jour.
Yes.
That we talked about a couple episodes ago. Yes. Thank you,
yeah,
Matthew.
Thanks for hooking that up. It's easy to forget about the Wayback Machine.
That's right.
But it's there for a reason.
There we go. So,
check out the amp du jour column if you can. That is a great piece of guitar writing. Experiential guitar writing from a master.
You know who strangely did a similar thing is at the end of Donald Fagen's book. He did a similar thing where he talks about what all these venues sound like and just day by day. You know, this one sucks. This one's great. Whatever.
He also complains about Four Seasons hotels in different cities.
Yeah.
That is an excellent book of musician complaining that
all time.
You just reminded me of, and I think I might have to revisit soon.
All time. All right. And today's episode is brought to you by Fender. Tell us about it, Nick.
Fender's Player 2 series includes all new vital versions of the company's most iconic models with contemporary upgrades for players of today. That includes comfortable modern C necks that have smooth rolled edges, the return of rosewood fingerboards, and new vintage colors that were unearthed from the Fender vaults.
Yes. For example, the Player 2 Stratocaster has that comfortable modern C neck with rolled edges, classic gear tuners for rock solid performance. So that's great. So yeah, head on over to Fender.com. Anything over $50, you get free shipping. And also, tied into this episode, you can check out the Kevin Shields signature pedal.
Yes, don't forget about the Shields blender, which is, I haven't played one, but I was very excited about that when that came out. It's fairly recent addition to the pedal line. Those look very cool. What I have done is watched Kevin Shields and Jay Mascis demo that pedal, and spent a lot of time listening to that, and it is very, very cool.
Instant My Bloody Valentine, as you'll hear in this episode.
So, okay, before we brought in a friend to talk about My Bloody Valentine today, and help us get through, just parsing out what's so important about Kevin Shields, and maybe mediating a little bit of our difference in opinions here.
Mm-hmm.
But for anybody, we dive right in. But for anybody that isn't familiar with My Bloody Valentine, they're most notable. The band is under the leadership of Kevin Shields. He's the visionary of the band. They are most notable for having just like walls of really loud guitars, just covered in fuzz and other effects. Legendary feats.
Painfully loud.
Painfully loud.
Painfully loud.
Loud to the highest of degrees, beyond healthy levels of loud.
Yeah.
These just legendary feats of volume. They're also known for taking forever to release new music. They have EPs and stuff, so this doesn't paint the whole picture, but their 3 albums, Isn't Anything from 1988, Loveless followed 3 years later, and then it wasn't until 2013 that the follow-up to Loveless, MBV, came out. And all that stuff is just like ripe for like myth making and people all sorts of theories on the internet about what would take so long to make these albums and what goes into making these albums. So we're rapping about it today with our good friend Andy. Andy is a friend of the show. Andy is a musical colleague. Andy Pitcher. He's called in before, so if you're a listener to the podcast, he'll be no stranger. But he is a great source for MBV thoughts and information. So we thought we'd bring him in.
And he dressed the part.
And he dressed the part. And Jason, you were really excited to do this episode.
I've been waiting for this for literally hours to do this.
Jason's enthusiasm throughout is
It is. I have a healthy appreciation. I'm not as into it as you guys. I have a healthy appreciation for them. I'm glad they exist. They're definitely a band you need to know about.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, once you're aware of them and you check out an album, do with that as you wish.
Yeah, I would say that your enthusiasm for MBV is about the same level as my enthusiasm for, Eric Johnson. As but we're here covering this stuff, and we're guitar journalists, and we can see the big picture.
Yeah. All right, let's get to it.
All right. So we're here with friend of the pod, call-in correspondent from previous episodes. And,
official shoegaze correspondent, Andy Pitcher.
Andy, thank you for being here, and thank you for wearing the right shirt for the gig.
Thank you. I had to find it in a trough full of things.
What does Kevin's guitar playing sound like to you?
Well, his sound that is most him, his most idiomatic sound, is the style that he calls glide guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like an undulating wall of sound that, as he describes it, like allows you to imagine far past what the eye can see. He wants it to be expansive. He wants it to be textured, and he wants it to be kind of a story in and of itself, which is always exciting when you get to experience it.
The glide guitar thing, like, is such a cool way to capture what his guitar playing sounds like. But I do kind of feel like it only captures that one thing, which it's like, how do you even describe it if you're describing it to somebody who's never heard of it or never heard it, right?
It sounds like a guitar that is melting in between every chord.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that the first time that I heard Kevin Shields play was I got Isn't Anything I heard before Loveless. And I don't think it was totally clear to me at the time what was guitar and what wasn't. And it was all guitar, but it's like, to me, I wasn't sure, are there synths in here? Like, what's happening in these sounds? And that's that's what was happening. But I think like that was the thing that captured me first. But the thing that I've been so fascinated and thinking a lot about this last couple days as we've been preparing for this episode, but just in general, because I don't really know how to capture it myself, is the sound of like guitars totally cranked, full of fuzz, just like sizzling and sounding like they're actually on fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
there's a not a shrillness, but like a high-end texture to his playing that is unbelievable. And I think it would be unforgivable if it wasn't for the context of the band he had built around him. Like,
yeah.
Debbie Gooch's bass tone, I think, is one of the most important part of Kevin's sound, because it contextualizes a lot of noise and a lot of like really out sounds, because she just has this big fuzzy bass tone under it. So it almost sounds like these two instruments are one, and the highs are melting and the lows are stable as anything.
Yeah, it's super unified on the records. And and then the vocals also play a part. Like, the vocals are also a part of the guitar sound, right? Like the vocals sound like they're coming out of the guitar sound, in a way that's really different than, the way you would talk about any other vocalist in any other band. Because they're so dreamy. It doesn't matter to me. I don't like. Can either of you hear what the vocal? I can never hear what they're saying.
They're
Yeah. Ding,
it
ding,
doesn't
ding.
matter to me.
Yeah, the lyrics are way more forward than you'd think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
it's like very like pillow talk, but it's kind of fun.
So, all right. So, Jason, what
Yes.
does My Bloody Valentine sound like to you?
I think as I was doing research for this episode, I remember when MBV came out,
Mhm.
when I was working at Premier Guitar. I was like, man, I hadn't heard Loveless in a long time. And I went through like another little deep dive and I was like, yep, sounds like My Bloody Valentine. Great. And kind of continued to push it to the side. But I ran across this spin article that the title of it pretty much summed it up pretty well for me. And it's like My Bloody Valentine, the opposite of rock and roll. And that pretty much was one of the best descriptions I've heard of. I don't think Kevin would necessarily disagree with that. I don't think he would view that as any kind of like slight or anything, but it's some of the most dense music I've ever heard,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it just like there's definite, but it's not dense without melody. That's the thing that is important. That
It's not noise music.
it's not noise music. No,
There's
Which
noise in it, but there's not noise music.
I always thought of it as until I really started to listen to it, especially Loveless. I think Loveless, I mean, again, there's 3 records there. Loveless is probably the most melodic of the 3, I think.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah.
Right? I don't think that's a hot take.
No.
It's the one that connected with the widest group of people, even for something that's obviously way left of center. As far as his guitar playing goes, it's like hard to I mean, you hear unusual notes and chords in places, but like here's the thing, Andy, have you ever seen a My Bloody Valentine tab book?
No,
No, I don't think one exists.
they tour with like 30 guitars because every tune is in a different tuning because it's all
Right.
just like open string drone.
But I'm thinking like something that came out in the early 90s that was a very big guitar record. Tab books were all the rage in the 90s.
Yeah.
I wonder if somebody like tried it and they're like, no, we can't do this. I would love to see one song. It'd probably be like one song would probably be like 70 pages.
Yeah, there's like a composition dissertation right there.
I mean,
Yeah.
because you'd have to get the stems. You'd have to do. There's no way you could do it from the mixes. You would have to get the stems. You would have to have Kevin's participation in it all.
Yeah.
And I'd be willing to bet he couldn't even remember what guitar 16 was doing on this track. You know what I mean? Which I do kind of love that.
He seems to have a memory that like when it gets sparked, like I've seen interviews where they bring up something and he kind of goes away for a moment and then it all comes back to him.
Sure.
Because it's like all he's ever thought about, which makes for a specific person.
But we're like, oh, Kevin, did you play that at the 8th fret or the 4th fret?
Yeah.
Right. Here's a fuzz. Like that's how I would think he would answer that kind of question.
So
It's, to me, they're like every part of the Beatles at once, where it's like if Revolution Number 9 was like a great pop song. You have all the vocal harmonies, you have all the melody, you got all the tape loops, you got all the noise, but you got all the acoustic guitar layers, but all of it at once all the time.
yeah.
Like a tune like Sometimes or something, where it's just like this like pounding on the same chords between the acoustic and the electric, all these tape loops. It's
I think it's more if you played every track off Revolver at the same time. I think that's basically the recipe.
I would agree, but White Album. Like I need the Revolution Number 9 stuff in there.
It's too long. White Album's too long. We can't,
Sure.
We're not. Yeah, it's too long. We need something short, experiment. Yeah, if you just line up every track on Revolver, in a DAW and just hit play, that's the next. That's the next My Bloody Valentine record.
Before we go any further, I wanna play something. So yesterday, I've been thinking about like what band is the most like What band is the most like My Bloody Valentine? And I've always thought about Jay Mascis, and there's a really great video of Jay Mascis and Kevin Shields playing the Fender Shields blender, Kevin's signature fuzz, and it's like those guys are like so tuned into each other. It's like Jay is just like soloing for a long time in the studio, and Kevin is just like tweaking the fuzz, going through all the sounds. And there's not a lot of people I want to watch doing that, but it's really fun to see those guys like interacting on a sonic level. And like I that's where I always go to. But to me, it's Smashing Pumpkins are the band that actually sounds the most My Bloody Valentine inspired. Not because I don't think they sound like My Bloody Valentine, but there's something about that, specifically the early stuff. Billy's guitar sound, the type of chords he's playing, sevenths and ninths with a lot of reverb and distortion. So I asked Billy Corgan to tell me about Kevin Shields, and here's what he had to say.
There are very few guitar players in the history of rock and roll whose style is so singular that they make you change the way you look at the guitar. And Kevin's in that very short list of guitar players that made you consider, why am I doing what I'm doing? There are very few guitar players in the history of rock and roll whose style is so singular that it forces you to reevaluate the way you play, why you play the way you play, and what you're playing through, because he achieved a sound that was so groundbreakingly different, you weren't even sure it was a guitar. And I remember sitting in a studio with Butch Vig, Smart Studios, his original studio, and we were hearing rumors that they were baking the tapes so that they would sound like they were melting. And I mean, we could, for the life of us, not figure out what Kevin was doing. Of course, when we work with Alan Mulder, Alan's like, oh, it's just an XPX90 effect that he's using, reverse reverb, and he's doing the whammy bar. And it's like, oh, that's it. But again, the beauty was, yes, it was an effect, but it was the way he had stumbled on something that everybody thought was irrelevant, and he revolutionized the way people looked at the guitar's atmospheric capability. The other thing that Kevin really contributed to my thinking in terms of how to record the guitar was recording tonally, breaking the guitar into sort of tonal registers, which probably the only other guitar player who's ever really done that is Brian May from Queen. Tony Iommi to a certain extent, but Brian May more so, where he looked at the guitar as like, oh, I can have it just be this mid-range instrument in this one section of the song and leave all this space around it, where most guitar players want the most full-bodied sound. So, yeah, I love and appreciate Kevin for that, because he's very unassuming about his contribution to the guitar, but absolutely a revolutionary.
Okay, so what do you guys think about what Billy said?
100% right. He's completely correct. I wish I would have been able to hear Loveless when it came out.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'd have a different...
That context is real different, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd have a real different perception of that album. Because I probably heard it for the first time probably in college, early 2000s, you know? And it didn't hit me the same way because first of all, I was in college. I was on a very strict diet of jazz guitar and just did not have time to even consider that as part of my own listening stuff. But when I hit it back in 2013, it started to click a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you mentioned Iommi, because I think Sabbath have a similar thing where when that, similarly, Jason, like, I wish I could have heard the first Sabbath record in context.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Thankfully, it was like one of the first albums I ever heard, so it impacted me. But just as time has gone on, I cannot imagine what the awe that must have inspired. Just a totally singular world. Like, all of a sudden, this thing came out fully baked. And MPV is similar because, like, even their EPs before Isn't Anything, they still sound like the Glider EP or Tremolo. They still sound like the band that we come to know.
Yeah.
Just from the start, it's like right out of somewhere. It's incredible.
And he also mentioned, like, it was good to know that even where he's sitting there with Butch Vig, like, they even couldn't figure out how he was making these sounds.
Yeah.
You know, like, I have no clue how, if I wanted to start to sound like My Bloody Valentine, live is one thing, studio is another. I think that's also a big difference. Even though they have a sound, I think how Kevin approaches it in the studio and how he approaches it on stage, you just don't have the luxury of having 16 guitar players playing at the same time. You know what I mean? And it's real interesting. I would love to hear like what does a My Bloody Valentine rehearsal sound like?
Yeah.
You know, like, all right, it's been 15 years. We're going to go play a handful of gigs. You get in the room. What's the logistical discussions and musical discussions those four people have to translate what's on a record to the stage?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, Kevin, there's like 8 amps on stage, I think. And as many pedal boards with different configurations. And it might be like 7 pedals for one tune, but that's how you do it. So he tours with like a big rack full of pedal boards into multiple amps at once, and different amps depending on what tune. And yeah, like I said, different guitars for different tunings.
I mean, he'd be the all-time rig rundown.
Yeah.
It would be long.
Well, first of all, it'd be long. There's lots of fodder there. And 2, it would be so rare to even have a situation where they're playing a gig or something, and we could, it's not like they're playing the Ryman, whatever, But that would be an all-time top 5 rig rundown, would be Kevin Shields.
Oh, man.
The Ryman
I hope there's an
apart.
opportunity.
The Ryman would fall apart. They would have to play outside, maybe in the caves.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be great, yeah.
I'd come down for that. They're the only band I've like traveled to see.
Yeah, so Andy, you're the only one of the 3 of us who's seen them live. Tell us, give us the experience.
Don't be surprised. Like you're not surprised that I have not seen them live. Don't.
No,
be
I'm surprised Nick hasn't. Too.
Oh.
But, come on, you got Trey back there. You like big sounds? No, but so.
Bro, no.
Sorry. And let me reset. So my MBV experience started with me nervously checking my bank account and deciding I could get 2 face value tickets. And I was in the back of class, and I wasn't supposed to have my laptop out, but I did it. And I grabbed a ticket for New York and a ticket for Philadelphia.
And what year was this? Hold on. What year was this?
Their last tour, 2016, 2015 or something. I was working at Supro. And, Megabus was $5, Philadelphia. And so that was the first show, and I got tickets on the floor. And for the second show, I got a ticket seated so that I could experience one in the crowd and one kind of like eye level with the arrays.
And what were the venues? Where are we talking?
This. I love how serious.
At Fillmore in Philadelphia, and then Hammerstein in New York.
Okay.
And I was experiencing. I brought a backpack full of stuff to Philadelphia. I was experiencing unbelievable back pain by the time the show started, and it was. I ended up laying down for a bit of it in the back of the venue, and it was euphoric. It was fucking incredible. Their sound live is unbelievable. They have a keyboardist with them who's doing a lot of the tape loop sounds, but it was exact. It was so gorgeous. And then the seated one really was like, if I can see them again, I'd like to be seated again. Seeing the full thing, they're doing like the acid test style, like projector, dish soap and oil thing. Just blasting. And there's so much clarity live that you wouldn't expect. They played new music, and I knew what the riffs were. It's not just that I knew the shape of this sound was this familiar song, because the new stuff was totally like you could dictate it. I wore earplugs and over ears. I had 50 dBs of reduction because I care about my ears, but I wanted to feel what that felt like. I only took the over off during the noise wall at the end of Feed Me With Your Kiss, and it was terrifying. I cannot believe people were just listening to that with their raw ear, but it really was a bodily experience over anything, and it was unlike anything. I've been lucky to see a lot of shows. I go to shows for work all the time. I've never felt anything like that.
Wow. Okay, so you answered a question I had, but I'm curious what you guys think about just like the experience of something with such volume. you know, we work in a heavy volume field, and I've certainly, like, you know, with my own music, pushed myself to do feats of high volume that I've regretted later. I've seen Sun a couple times, and I think I've seen them 3 times, two or three times, and it's just like these amazing shows. But I kind of stopped going to see them as much as I love them, and the experience of seeing. It's like, okay, if I were to listen to a Sun record, I would say the best way to experience Sun is to see it live and to just like have that stuff resonating in my body. But I think now when I've thought about going to see it, like last time they were here, friends were going, and I was like, I sort of flipped my way of thinking and decided that the best way to listen to Sun is on a record, because live I'm so protected. My ears are so protected that I'm feeling the experience of Sun, but I'm not actually hearing the overtones and the harmonic information that they're creating because I'm guarding my ears from it. The only way to actually experience it is at extreme volume. And I've come to this whole, like, you know, I've spun out on this about like, how do you hear all this and also feel it? And it sounds like from what you're saying, like my Bloody Valentine show would be the same. Like I'd be stuck with the same feelings about it. Like I want to hear how all these amps interacting with each other clash. Like on the record, they make all these ghost sounds, right? There's this other stuff that's happening. And it's such dense harmonic information that if you cover up your ears, you're not hearing those high harmonics. What do you think about that?
That's really fair, but I think when you're working with an amplifier like a Marshall, a lot of that information gets clipped. And so the highs that like a Marshall produces end up being really powerful and not shrill, but sharp.
Yeah.
And so when you're using something like a Super Fuzz, which is very bright, very first order harmonic forward, you know, style fuzz, it cuts through the hearing protection. You're impervious to some of it. Of course, there's going to be details you miss, but those greatest details that you can see under the microscope of a studio are lost to the volume live. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of that information just isn't there to hear.
Got it.
Because it's being overpowered by the next louder thing.
Yeah.
And what you end up with is, for me, in my opinion, that physical experience. There's some interesting interviews where Kevin talks about discovering that stuff for the first time, where they played a pool hall, and instead of starting their set, they were like, well, we'll just like kind of annoy. It was a bar, but there were guys playing pool. They're like, we'll just kind of annoy these guys until they leave. And they ended up just playing on like 2 chords for half an hour, and it was better than the set would have been, in their opinions. Like it was such an incredible thing. So then when they went back, they used to practice in like an art gallery or something. So they dragged all these amps into the big room and just for an hour like did the thing that now they're known for, and discovered this body experience more than a sound experience. So yeah, I would say live, like, you're not missing anything, in my opinion, by wearing hearing protection.
Okay.
They hand out earplugs at the shows for free.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah,
that's
like they
thoughtful.
They want it to be bodily. They don't.
Yeah.
It's not an aural thing. Yeah.
I wonder how much they charge for a ticket if I could just sit in the lobby. Because that comes to mind. And the other thing is, do you think he records loud?
Yes,
I do. I would think so.
Because when you're at a show, obviously more of the volume is coming from the PA than the stage, right?
Typically, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious if he has ways to record. I mean, he can't record at PA volume.
No, but I think the amps are dimed. They would record kind of out in the countryside, so they could do whatever.
Yeah, I think that they're loud.
And then does he mix loud?
I bet he mixes loud.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Just on like question. My gut response is that he mixes loud.
Because you always, watch these videos with mixers and they say it's surprising when somebody who's like a really experienced mixer how soft they're listening when they're mixing.
Mhm.
You know, and if it's such a, if he wants the end result, obviously when it's on a record, whoever's listening to it is listening to it whatever volume they want to. But if he wants to kind of protrude that bodily experience somehow through a record, I wonder if he feels like that needs to translate to mixing to get it as close as he can.
They go through extreme means at times to capture the live thing on the record. Like Loveless a couple years ago got a re-release where it was recorded to tape, it was mixed to tape, it was mixed in analog, but when it was pressed to vinyl, it was digitized. And they did a lathe cut off of a master tape a couple of years ago that you could get, where it basically is like there's no 1 and or 0 between his microphone in 80 or 9 whenever they started recording it and like your stylus today. And they sell out. Like the people are into them.
How many copies have you bought?
One.
Okay.
Just one. Yeah, but I do own it. Yeah, it's, you know, it's like, and it's gorgeous and it does sound different than like pressings I had heard prior to that.
All right, so to just kind of sum this up about My Bloody Valentine. Somebody coming in, listen to this. All right, where do I start? It's pretty easy because there's 3 albums. You can just and a couple EPs. You can just go listen to all of it in a couple hours. For me, Loveless is like such an obvious place to start. Obviously, I feel like for me though, like, you know, we were talking about this the other day, Jason, that like Lost in Translation is such a famous movie and so many people have seen that movie. It's like, and I love the vibe of that movie. And I think that, you know, Kevin did the soundtrack. It's like it's not My Bloody Valentine. It's Kevin solo. That sometimes it's like, have you heard that? Do you like that vibe? Okay. So it's like, that's sort of like the precursor, that it's like a good way to talk about it. Like, have you vibed on Lost in Translation? Then you should listen to Loveless. But I don't know that I think like I said, I heard Isn't Anything first. I don't think that's a bad place to start either. I don't think that MBV is a bad place to start because it's like between the recording of Loveless and MBV and the release of MBV, like the quality changed. Like MBV is so textural and so granular that it's like that might be just as good of a place to start. What do you guys think?
I would find the record, since there's so few, I would find the one that best fits your interest. If you like more rock sounds, I would jump to maybe Loveless. If you're into power pop, like Isn't Anything is a great place. There's a lot of fun songs on there that like translate really well to acoustic guitars. It's just that the textures are wild. And if you're more on the ambient side of things, if you like experimental music, if you like, you know, the next layer of sound, MBV is a really great place to start. To me, there's an obvious gradient that Loveless sits really great in between, but it's not necessarily my favorite record of theirs. I wouldn't say another one is, but it's not for me like a clear winner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say start with Loveless. I mean, that's the one that's most well known, and then
that's the one you can like have a conversation with anybody about.
Yeah.
Would you do now, Nick? In our ZZ Top episode, you spoke of this mythical challenge.
Yeah.
Do you know about this, Andy? You knew about this, right?
I know about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where you have to listen to a band's entire discography on a road trip, above conversational level.
Yeah.
So you could feasibly, Nick, drive from Philly to New York with traffic.
Exactly. Yeah, with
and
traffic,
get through the whole thing twice.
Yeah, exactly. I would do that. I would do that. Like the ZZ Top challenge is way harder because it's days of driving. This is just like if I got myself on a tip where I want to hear a lot of My Bloody Valentine, right? And, you know, not even to put a pin on it, if I just want to hear a lot of like textural guitar sounds, yeah, I'd do that on a drive to New York where I know there's going to be some traffic, or a drive down to DC or something. I'd I'd just do it probably.
All right, a couple rapid fire super fan questions, Andy. Number one, is the Mythical box set ever going to see the light of day?
He's never lied about. Well, no, there's a lot of myths, but about a release, they've always come out. It's just eventually, if he, if time runs out before he does it, no. But I do trust that everything will happen one day, because so far it has.
So do you feel like because he does speak a lot about all these songs that were recorded that have never been released.
Yeah.
You think at some point those could see the light of day?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Number two.
He's constantly, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
He's constantly remixing stuff. A couple of years ago, they put out a CD that was all their early EPs and stuff as like a collection. And it's all remastered and it all sounds great. And for someone to like constantly be tinkering, I've always thought of Kevin kind of as like an impressionist, and a lot of those folks like Ives were the same way, where they were constantly tweaking their own material. So I would not be surprised if that stuff came out eventually.
All right, number two, will there be another My Bloody Valentine album and or tour?
I think there will be another EP. The music that they were playing when I saw them live, that was like new music. It sounded kind of like The Who. It was cool. They're like, through the My Bloody Valentine filter, but they're working on stuff. The last one took 22 years or something. So, we got some time, but I think there will be another EP and hopefully more touring. I'd like to see them again.
All right. Final question.
I would like to see them.
You both can weigh in on this. You have a My Bloody Valentine tribute band. What's the name of the band?
MVB. My Bloody Valentine.
Nick?
Oh man, that's tough. I don't know.
Glider.
Glider's
good. Good one.
But Glider's just a good band name.
Yeah.
Glider's not just a tribute band.
It probably is a band name.
Maybe tribute band. Shields is Blenders.
See?
Oh, like full with the costume and everything. Yeah. Yeah, cover band versus tribute band. I think tribute band I would do MVB.
I like that, yeah.
Cover band, the Unlovables. It's like slightly loveless, but
Jason,
but
I would
like,
ask you, but I don't think you would ever even consider having a My Bloody Valentine.
I just want to know that if I see any of these band names in the listings to like not
if
go.
you had to, what cover band name would trick you into going to the first rehearsal before you realized it was a My Bloody Valentine band? Like, I accidentally joined a jam band once. I didn't realize it was a jam band.
What was the name? Was it based on their name?
I can't talk about that, but but you know what I mean? Like, what band name that, and then you're like, oh, duh, it was My Bloody Valentine. I didn't even realize.
Oh man, there'd be so many.
They got cool titles. They got good titles.
Yeah.
Another thing about them, like thinking of cover bands and their influence and Kevin Shields' influence, like Sabbath is the same way. I've never heard another band do it right. The influence is so omnipresent, but there's like two bands I've ever heard where like the drums are heavy. My Bloody Valentine is like a very heavy band in a lot of ways. In the same way that like I've never heard someone go to do Sabbath and swing the right way. Like Bill Ward growing up listening to jazz versus someone growing up listening to Bill Ward, two very different players.
Totally. Yeah.
And same for me with My Bloody Valentine. Someone who grew up listening to Kevin Shields is not going to get the nuance right. They're just going to get this great explosive thing. They're a heavy band. And then you get like all this really beautiful dreamy stuff, but there's no toughness to it.
I'm going to call it, they're going to be doing the midnight set at Bonnaroo next summer. Or the sunrise set. That would probably be even better.
Oh, that'd be sick.
I
Wake everybody up.
have to, like Hendrix at Woodstock.
Yeah.
My grandpa went to Woodstock. My grandpa's a real, he was a mechanic in the New York Fire Department for basically his whole life. And very straightforward guy. And one day he's like, yeah, I was at Woodstock. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, it's me and some friends went up. And, he like only sang Sinatra to me, like classic Italian grandpa. I was like, what was it like, And he's like, when Hendrix came on, some people were having an incredible time and some people were hiding in their sleeping bag, just like having a really bad trip. And then he kind of got quiet and I was like, oh man, I think my grandpa was in a sleeping bag having a real bad trip. Yeah, that's my shout out to grandpa.
All right. Well, thank you, Andy, for hanging with us and putting up with my all-time favorite band, My Bloody Valentine.
It's all good, You need both sides of it.
All right.
Well, that was our talk with Andy Pitcher about My Bloody Valentine
and Billy Corgan.
And Billy Corgan, it was great to get that contribution. I told Jason the other day, I said, I'm coming in hot for this one. I'm really prepared. Yeah, what do you think? After this, after we split, you get some lunch, you putting on Loveless, or are you coming back to this?
Nope. Again, like I said, I will happily buy a ticket to sit in the lobby. I'll throw him a 20 to sit in the lobby.
You respect your hearing too much.
Dude. It's more than that. But but yeah, I again, I will probably not be making that gig.
Let me ask you this. Last episode we recorded was Judas Priest. After that, have you listened to Judas Priest again? No. I feel like we go into such deep dives on these that once we get done recording, no matter who it is, need a break. We're on to the next. We're on to the next one. That is it. But I still have Judas Priest albums saved on Apple Music. Like I'm coming back to Judas Priest,
And Eric Johnson.
Maybe less so. But actually, that was a very good our Eric Johnson episode. Andy Wood gave us some really great tips. You gave some great tips. So, I felt like I was directed to some stuff I do need to check out more.
That's right. All right. So remember, please hit us up at 100 Guitarists at premierguitar.com. You can call or text us at 319-423-9734 any time of day, 24/7. And special thanks to Fender for sponsoring this episode. Make sure to check out the Fender Player 2 series. Head on over to fender.com, and anything over $50, you get free shipping.
We'll see you next week.